The water pump needs to be set up for perfusion on each day that it is used. This involves a series of steps to replace the air in the pump with water, aiming to ensure that no small bubbles form, which will block the capillaries or affect the performance of the equipment. Position the manometry trolley beside the couch on which the patient will lie. The pump should be at approximately the level of the patient for optimal performance. Boil some water in a kettle. The water should be particle-free. Medical water for irrigation is a good choice. Fill the water reservoir, ensuring that the tap at the outlet is turned off. Hold down the Perspex cylinder to maintain the seal, then screw the lid on the top firmly. Place the water reservoir back in its holder. Ensure that the water outlet is pointing away from the patient and important equipment, and that the air inlet is pointing in an appropriate direction for the blue air tubing to connect. Attach the water tubing to the water outlet of the reservoir. Ensure that there is a filter in place, otherwise you will run into problems with blockage of the capillaries. Attach the other end of the water tube to the inlet of the pump. Connect a 5 ml Luer lock syringe to the three-way tap. The next step is to prime the pump with water, ensuring that air is expelled from the manifold. First, open the water tap at the outlet of the water manifold. This ensures that water can flow through the manifold and into the wastewater area. Next, rotate the three-way tap at the inlet of the pump so that the lever, which indicates the off position, is pointing to the right along the manifold. You will also need to open the tap at the base of the water reservoir. Suctioning on the 5 ml syringe will now draw water from the reservoir into the syringe. There will of course also be some air which was in the tubing and the filter. Turn the tap to the left to close the inlet and expel the water from the syringe. Reattach the syringe and gently syringe water through the manifold until it comes out into the wastewater trough. Repeat the process of filling the syringe with water and gently irrigating the manifold until no further air bubbles are passing through. Once you have cleared the manifold and tubing of air, close the tap at the outlet of the manifold. Leave the syringe attached and turn the tap so that the lever faces the syringe. This will allow water to perfuse into the manifold from the water reservoir. Now attach the blue air pressure line to the inlet of the water reservoir and pressurize the reservoir by either opening the valve on a compressed air cylinder or turning on the air compressor. Water should now start perfusing up through the capillaries and into the transducer chambers. The transducer membranes change in appearance as the chamber fills with water, appearing to become larger and blacker. In this picture, in the top row, you can see one transducer on the left where the water has filled the chamber, and another transducer on the right where the chamber remains empty. The two transducers in the lower row both have their chambers filled with water. After a few minutes, water should begin to drip into the wastewater trough from the connectors. If one channel is not dripping and the transducer chamber is not filled with water, the capillary is likely to be blocked by a microbubble. In this picture, the channel second from the right is not dripping. In order to deal with a blocked capillary, fill the 5 ml syringe from the water reservoir by turning the lever to the right and allowing the syringe to fill. Remember that the water will be under pressure, so you will need to control the movement of the plunger of the syringe. Now turn the lever back to the left and firmly press on the syringe plunger, pressurizing the manifold. You may need to use 2 hands to generate a sufficiently high pressure. Ensure that the syringe does not slip off or you will get a stream of water across the room. This is why I recommend that you use a 5 ml Luer lock syringe, as a slip Luer connector will come off much more easily. You should see the rate of dripping from the other connectors increase, indicating the higher pressure. Apply the higher pressure for a minute or so and then turn the lever back so that it faces the syringe and water is perfusing from the reservoir into the manifold again. After a couple of minutes, check the transducer chamber to see if it is now filled with water. If it is, in another few minutes you should see water dripping from the corresponding connector. If it does not fill with water, you should repeat the process, pressing harder or possibly using a smaller syringe, for example a 3 ml Luer lock syringe, which will generate a higher pressure. If this still does not work, the capillary may be blocked and would need to be changed. This should not occur if you have a water filter installed. Now it is time to attach the manometry catheter. Hold the catheter up by the hub and disentangle the connector tubing. Locate channel 16, which will be in the outer ring of tubes. Attach this to the left-hand end of the line of connectors. You will find that channel 15 is adjacent to channel 16 on the catheter if you rotate it clockwise, and so on down to channel 7. Channels 1 to 6 will need to be attached by locating the appropriate connector. Ensure that all of the connectors are firmly seated and that the numbering of the catheter channels is correct. You should be able to go from channel 1 at the right-hand end across to channel 16 at the left-hand end. Note that the channels of the catheter are in the opposite order to the recording channels. This is because the catheter is numbered with the most distal channel as number 1, whereas the recording software numbers the most proximal channel, number 1. You should now allow water to perfuse through the catheter. Place the catheter in a bowl of water with all of the perfusion ports on the catheter submerged. The bowl can be placed either on the patient's couch or on the manometry trolley. You will see small bubbles of air perfusing from the catheter. When these stop, all of the lumina of the catheter should be filled with water. You should let the catheter perfuse for another few minutes before using it, and perhaps give it a flush with some water using the technique described previously for clearing bubbles. To check that the catheter is functioning correctly and to remove the pressures generated by perfusing water through the lumina of the catheter, start the software and a data acquisition. Select the appropriate calibration and patient, and the recording screen will come up looking similar to this one. Pressures will differ between channels as the pressures required to perfuse each channel differ. In general, the pressures in the lower channels will be more positive as they have a longer fluid path and hence a higher resistance. When it is clear that the pressures are stable, press on the tan-coloured Set Reference Value for All Channels button. This sets the instantaneous pressures in all channels to 0 and is required to remove the pressure offsets due to perfusion of fluid through the catheter. If this step is not completed, the data recorded will not be accurate. The screen should go white to the right of the marker and remain white, perhaps with very light green or blue horizontal stripes, which indicate a minor degree of drift in the perfusion pressures. If there is significant drift, flush the catheter and reset the atmospheric reference pressures. You will need to press F1 to make the button reappear before you can press it again. In order to check that each channel is recording and that the calibrations are consistent between channels, lift up the bowl containing the catheter. This should cause a vertical stripe in the recording, which should be consistent across channels. If one channel does not rise with the others, there is likely to be a problem with the perfusion of that channel, and it will need to be investigated. If you see a picture similar to that on the screen, you are ready to start the study.